Most people look at the sky and feel a sense of dread. They see the headlines, the movies, and the grainy footage, and their survival instincts kick in. They're terrified. And honestly, that makes sense. Our brains are hardwired to fear what we don't understand. As an experiencer, I've been there. I've felt that paralyzing what if in the middle of the night. But what if I told you that fear is actually a wall keeping you from the most profound connection of your life? Today, I'm breaking down why we feel this fear, the biological glitch causing it, and exactly how you can shift from terror to total peace. Let's stop being afraid and start understanding. Welcome back to The Fourth Kind. I'm glad you all decided to join me here. Why aliens trigger fear in the first place? Well, it's the fear of unknown, the loss of control. Then there's how movies, media, and religion shaped alien fear narratives sometimes. You know, like your mind is thinking the worst, obviously, if you were to witness one of these things. And not knowing is scarier than knowing. These are very valid, obviously, reasons to be afraid of these beings. We are unaware of what they want, why they're here, and why they're specifically, possibly even in front of you. And this can be psychologically traumatizing because we're used to seeing things like this in movies, and it's usually in a horror movie or a sci-fi movie that can get a little scary at times. But here it is right now, in front of you. Now, some of you might have only experienced seeing them, seeing their craft, and an encounter with them up close. And even sometimes just witnessing the craft can challenge your entire belief system. And of course, you can run through your mind and think, well, it's probably government or whatever, but there's this part of your mind that's gonna fantasize and create fear because it's unknown. There is no answer, and that answer doesn't come to you. You'll ask this question over and over, well, is it this, is it that? But the more you ask this question, start to develop a fear. And then your mind creates and fabricates, some of the most terrifying things. We're more programmed sometimes to think of the worst, to be more prepared for it. And this can become extremely crippling. And I know that. And it's what I went through a lot. I was always looking out my window, are they coming? Are they are they here? What was that sound? Did you hear that? You become extremely paranoid, and you start sleeping with one eye open, and you become a very light sleeper. You're waking up to almost any sound, and you're just not getting a healthy dose of rest. And at work or school all day, your mind is thinking about it, thinking about the experience, and it continues to replay over and over, and this time more detailed or with maybe added fears. And it becomes a phobia. And that's what it did for me. It became an actual traumatic phobia of these things. And I had no real reason to be afraid of them. They did things. They even spoke to me. And but there were other reasons to why they appeared very terrifying. And that was because when I was experiencing them as a child, into my teenagehood, there was a lot of poltergeist-like activity that surrounded them for some reason. So I was already afraid now, thinking, oh, there's a poltergeist in the house, there's ghosts and all these other types of things happening, doors slamming, feet tapping and running across the floor. It just felt like the energy felt heavy, thick. It became quite eerie. Your imagination now, of course, is highly active and playing even more on top of all of the actual physical, paranormal things that are happening around you. And then you're hearing sounds, and you're not alone in this. You're with family or friends, even sometimes. And that's what it was like for me. Sometimes things even just flew across the room, which made no sense. So there's a lot of paranormal activity that might happen when these beings are present, and your mind will think it's just ghosts or all these other things, but then you have, this alien encounter on top of that, and you don't know what to make of any of this. And it just broke my mind a lot and caused a lot of fear. But I'm here to tell you that we really have nothing to fear but fear itself. Because it got to the point where I was having heart palpitations and feeling like I was having a heart attack just from my own fear, my own thoughts running away with me. There's a massive psychological impact when it comes to encounters and strange experiences like this. There's the shock and fear. There's shock first, you freeze. Your mind is racing, and it's trying to explain what is going on. It can't. And your eyes are just widened with fear, and you're now gonna think of every horror movie. Everything that you've ever experienced from scary horror movies now suddenly is coming forward and going, oh my God, this is real. And now you don't know what's gonna happen next. And again, that's that fear of the unknown, fear of what they might do. And of course, we think the worst. So there's all of that. And it was never as bad as I thought. But when I think back to it, it was terrifying. But it was never what my mind was making me feel at that time. And it took many experiences for me to really realize this, because I grew up very religious, Catholic, Italian, and I had my own beliefs, like, where are my angels? Where is God to save me from this? Yeah, that's just, there was a lot of questions. I didn't see them as demons in the Bible, obviously, that I read. Satan or demonic creatures should look like. So they didn't look like that either, and they never did anything harmful to me that made me think that. In fact, it was different, very different, and they would even communicate and tell me everything was going to be okay, that they weren't here to harm me, that just to relax, calm down, it's okay. They kept repeating this, and this is obviously said through a sort of downloaded telepathic form of communication. It's not a guess either. Like, you just are 100% aware that is what's happening, but you're thinking in your mind, are they talking to me? Or is this really them? This is really them? Oh my God, that's them. So you know exactly what they're thinking and saying, those of them that do speak to you, of course. So that helped at times, but then there was times where they didn't talk, and I didn't like that. Who doesn't want something that's staring right at you, that looks like these beings, big giant eyes, black eyes even, not a lot of expression at all, not talking to you? I mean, I would freak out even just if a human did that. So it can be a bit unsettling. I kind of wish they would do it a little differently, but maybe they have no other choice. I'm not quite sure of that, but I do believe that, maybe that's just how they are, some of them. I've encountered 4 beings, just so you know. That is my own experiences, and each one is a little different. 2 communicate, the other 2, the 3 communicate and 1 does not. And that's the scariest one, but they don't really harm you. I know what their duty was too. It was to just do the abduction part and not to really communicate with you. I don't know how aware I was supposed to be, but I think it didn't matter at that point. So I will get into more of my own experiences later. But for now, let's talk about how this fear after the experience starts to affect you. And it's when the mind really takes over. Fear sometimes comes later. It kind of builds up more and more. It will continue to haunt you with thoughts, and it might not even really affect you until a couple years down the road, maybe even a decade, where it all comes back. You start thinking about it. You start questioning everything. It just really depends on how aware you want to be about it. Some people just bury this and they don't want to talk about it anymore, and that's it. And that might be a healthy response. That is possibly the best response, especially if they didn't have to deal with any more encounters. They had one encounter and that's it. And you know what? They're good not knowing that this exists and just completely going back to their normal lives. And I don't blame them. And you can't blame people who are afraid. When I went to MUFON in my 30s to talk about some of my experiences to help myself cope through this sort of trauma, at that time I was afraid and I was very confused, but I also started to learn a little bit more about them. They were showing me things and telling me things that didn't seem as threatening as I thought they were. And that's when I started to feel less afraid. I obviously think I would still be a little afraid if I saw one again in this more current time in my life. I haven't seen them physically or fully in their form since 2014. So it's been a bit, and I kind of like that. But at the same time, it's kind of still in the back of my mind that if I had to see it, in my vulnerable states where, I turn a corner in my house and there's one, that's going to make anyone jump, obviously. So that shock and fear sort of thing kicks in again, right? But the questioning of your sanity will always be there. And this is why disclosure from our government was so relieving. It was wonderful, actually, to hear them talking about it. But at the same time, I'm a little angry. I'm like, well, it took you guys long enough. This whole time you made us all believe we were nuts. And they would make fun of us and laugh. And no, they crack jokes about it, play the spooky X-Files music and all that. And then you start this thing where you do a little bit of this isolation. Because you don't feel like you're being believed. And that's where I had to go to MUFON, because I didn't know who to talk to about it. And it was making the fears worse. So when I went to MUFON, I basically was able to communicate with a lot of people that also had very similar fears. And some people's fears were so extreme that I thought, well, gee, I think I had it a little easier because I had so many experiences that I didn't fear them as much anymore now. And I started to question, but it was almost like a mirror. Like I could have ended up like some of these other MUFON members, paranoid, thinking the most radical things, being extremely political even about it. I mean, it was the point where I was like, this is just, at this point, I felt bad. They probably weren't sleeping at night and thinking all these things were like everything was under control by these beings, and and that they were coming for them. And people were in their 60s, 70s even, talking about this one experience they had. And it was mostly like they saw one of the craft. It's like they didn't even have a moment where they saw the being themselves. And I'm like, my goodness, these people would have lost their minds if they saw that. And that can be a dangerous thing, right? So, but they lived for years, decades of their lives, fearing this one incident drove them to think that their whole world was now suddenly under control and that their lives could end at any moment, and these beings would come and take over the planet and all this really scary stuff that they were so afraid of. And my experiences with these beings and the communication I had with them led to nothing like that. I mean, their own agenda and all that was not threatening in a way. I kind of agreed with some of the things they were very concerned about. And a lot of it was the planet, our growth, the fact that we can be destructive. It's just these most very basic moral things. They do have breeding programs, and they do study the food and things that we are doing, things that we create. They're very, very fascinated by our sense of creation and our understanding of that. So this made me well, they don't seem so bad, but I'm almost seeing these other MUFON members, and it gave me a quick perspective of myself. And I thought, we really are just creating our own fears, aren't we? So I had to tell them. I said, well, you guys have to understand, you're so afraid that these beings are gonna come and take your life, your family, or whatever. But I mean, most of them have lived their lives. To be honest, they were in their 70s, and I'm like, nothing seemed to come for them. They were just there because they saw a craft in the sky back in the 50s or something, and or the 60s, and I was like, what are you so afraid of? Well, I mean, they now know something exists. So, but their mind was making up the rest, because they never even had an encounter with these beings. So they didn't know. They just thought, well, they have to be dangerous because they're more powerful, and we fear what we do not understand, right? So this is where I would say where we need to take control back of our own emotions, thoughts, and feelings towards these beings and their tech. Yes, they do have better tech than us. I think we're kind of catching up, to be honest, and probably due to us stealing their tech. So, but I still think that they are more aware of things. They are concerned about things that a lot of humans actually on planet Earth are concerned about as well. So they think like a lot of us do. They don't appear as destructive or violent. I think that might appear that way to some people because they had some really scary experiences of being part of the experimental program. And I think that might be where, it can be quite terrifying. But you live to tell the tale, right? So, the cow mutilations and all of that back in the 90s and everything was very confusing as well to people, and that looked horrific. But I mean, look what we do to cows. I mean, have you seen these factories? It's quite horrific. But these beings are not doing that for the same reason that we are. I believe they're studying these beings, studying the food, studying what we're doing to the animals, because they seem very concerned, like I said, about the planet, and they heavily informed me on that. And also destructive weapons. So I think when it comes to healing, we need to say to ourselves, what part of this was my mind creating the fear and the imagery, and what part of it is reality? You're still alive today. You're still here to talk about it. You're probably my age or older. That's a good sign. And that tends to be a time too where it doesn't seem that they bother people after a certain age. It's not that they're bothering, it's just they might have been doing certain studies while I was young and into my 20s and into my 30s. And then after that, it kind of died down a little, and that was very nice and relieving. It allowed me to finally focus on my life and my career and my talents that I like to do. So I wasn't just thinking about them all the time. I could go to MUFON a lot less. I didn't have to go every week, to share things and talk about things and help myself cope through it. I think talking about it helps. If you're someone who's just holding it in and it's just haunting you and you're doing this isolation thing because you're afraid of how people are going to think of you, I recommend finding a group and coming forward and talking about it, and finding people that also have had experiences close to yours, and maybe even a little more. You'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot. Also, don't forget to ground yourselves. It's easy to kind of start to think of this as a religion or something like that, connecting it to that. I really think we need to stay grounded. I do believe in consciousness and an afterlife and all of those things. I'm with that, but I also am a very in between those realms kind of a person. I like to still be very grounded, very realistic, and skeptical. I question a lot of things. I question everything. After my experiences, I've questioned everything. And I stopped just accepting information that was given to me through ancient texts, religion and people telling you how you should be. And it's like telling you how you should think. When I say, just always hold on to your heart, your mind is yours. It is not owned by anyone, not even these other beings. They can't control you. Or they don't want to. That's the thing. What are they going to do with you? They're not doing anything. If they really wanted to take over this planet, they would have done it already. So you can release that thought. It's over. And the feeding thing, people have a fear that they feed on us and all that. That too, I never witnessed anything like that. And I've been on their craft twice. So absolutely nothing like that. I mean, they never did anything like that to me, never did anything like that to my family. My whole family had multiple encounters with men in black and also these beings. So I know there's a couple of programs we're in, but they're more like scientists. And if you want to question anything about it, if you want to have a good perspective on how it is really, we are like the animals in the wild, and they're basically National Geographic. So they're out there studying, maybe tagging us. They put implants in us, and I have a couple. They have their ways of being able to monitor, stay in touch with you, and protect you. Some of them are worried about you, and that might not seem like truth, but they are. If you're part of a certain program, I actually feel very protected by them now, and there's a reason for that. After my brother's death, they showed me something, and they cared about my mental health at that time, and they came to help. And that was the first time I ever really, I think, thought for a second, like, gee, you know what? I think I've been afraid of nothing this whole time. I mean, they are aware. They are aware of the trauma they cause. It's the same thing as when we take an animal out of its wild and we tag it, we put a tracking in it, we help them if they're dying of something or whatever. Then when we throw them back into the wild, and these poor animals are like, what just happened? But they don't know that we're just being innocent. We're just watching them. We're not there to harm it. We don't want to get ourselves even involved in the natural process, the natural circle of life. And they too don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. They're not here to stop us from living our lives and completing our missions and, believing in what we want. They're not here for that. They could easily come here and start a religion on their own and make us do whatever they want, but they're not doing that. So stay grounded. Just always know that you are in control even when you don't think you are. And there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to fear. You're going to be okay. So you can always have your mind being open and awakened to anything that's new, but you never have to fear. Take care of yourselves, and don't forget to keep looking up.